All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samantha, and on behalf of Caresoft, I'd like to welcome you to our Domino Data Lab and Latent AI webinar, Accelerating AI from Experimentation to Trusted Operational Deployment. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's presentation. First, we have Rear Admiral Douglas Small, retired U.S. Navy leader, Chris Elsons, Director of Public Sector GTM, Domino Data Lab, and Jags Kandasamy, CEO of Latent AI. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our speakers of the day. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Samantha, and welcome everyone to our webinar. In my last job in the Navy, I was the direct reporting program manager for Project Overmatch, and we were charged with delivering a new operational architecture, which consisted of the connective tissue to be able to deliver a software-centric force. Now, with the blinding speed of advance in modern warfare, the Navy saw that, hey, we really need to get more software centric. And with that was, the idea of taking advantage of advances in commercial industry where, it's just been amazing to watch the advances in software development and delivery in commercial industry. So we were charged with developing and delivering agile DevSecOps processes, the tooling, all that infrastructure, to include an extension to machine learning operations to be able to deliver software that was performing AI functions, and including in the Navy and Marine Corps edge devices. So for us, any device, that and many devices cannot count on connectivity to the cloud, but they still need to be able to take advantage of all of these commercial advances. So, as one does in this business, you get a team together that you trust and let them go do their job. So we assembled a team of an AI lead from Niwot Pacific here in San Diego. Happened upon a Navy commander who was on loan to our project from DIU and was familiar with seabed warfare and mine warfare and things like that. They in turn worked with the program office in the program executive for unmanned and surface combatants. And from that team, this project AMMO was born. And AMMO is one of those, awful military acronyms within acronyms, but it stands for Automatic Target Recognition using Machine Learning Operations for Maritime Operations. So that project was born. So that team, got fleshed out and developed a reference architecture for what this machine learning operations tool chain would look like. And through DIU, the Defense Innovation Unit issued a commercial solutions opening. And this was for best of breed commercial companies for every function within that machine learning operations tool chain. So through DIU, we procured some licenses and made those available to the developers through the Project Overmatch software armory, and then went off and demonstrated, setting records for agility and speed and turning around model updates to, things like UUVs, as austere an edge case as you can imagine, and with the U.S. Navy and allied navies. So considerable progress was made in showing how you can go from a data repository to an updated machine learning operations model on an extreme edge case in record time. And so from that, we get to where we are today, where AppFit, which is OSD's Accelerate the Procurement and Fielding of Innovative Technologies, has that together with the focus on commercial software from DoD and of course the Secretary of Defense, focusing heavily on commercial software. What does that mean for an organization like AppFit? Well, they funded the continuation of these commercial licenses in this machine learning operations tool chain, and those remain available. And that pretty much gets us to where we are today with this project. So with that overview, I would like to now turn the panel discussion to a panel discussion with Chris and Jags. So, first off, gentlemen, just a question for each of you. How is the AppFit Award addressing the overall goals of the Defense Department from your perspective?
Jack, do you want to start?
You can start, Chris. I'll go in.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for your attendance today, and yeah, appreciate the question. So I think of it kind of at two levels. So there's the strategic level on what Department of Defense is looking to accomplish, and I think where the work Latent, Domino, and our other partners have been able to effectuate through Project Demo really fits within this AI autonomy initiative for the Department of Defense, where they can start to automate decision making, automate sensor data gathering, being able to make intelligible decisions out of those at the speed that's required for some of these potential future conflicts, like you had stated. Being able to shorten kill chains, being able to really accelerate decision making is kind of the gist. And so seeing some of the geopolitical tensions heating up in the Asia Pacific region, that kind of ties into the more tactical requirements where we see AtFit being very beneficial. And so first and foremost, and many people across DoD talk about this, getting these innovative solutions in the hands of the white warfighters has a variety of challenges. One of the big pieces is contracting and being able to earmark dollars for this type of work. And so, from our perspective, and as you stated, Rear Admiral Small, this has been a journey, right? Starting with the Defense Innovation Unit and their commercial solutions offering, which really helped us get our foot in the door and start proving out value and the amount that we can reduce the time that it takes to be able to deploy models, retain information, maintain these models out in the field, which has a variety of downstream implications for warfighters. But to move into a production environment has its own challenges and what we often hear referred to as the valley of death. And so AFIT stepping in to fund this initiative, and not only fund the existing initiative within Project Ammo, but to expand its scope to enable us to deploy these capabilities across a broader cohort of use cases under the Project Overmatch umbrella has been really important because we view scalability as being, as important as being able to deliver these capabilities to the warfighter, particularly in the direction that the DoD is trying to push. And so making this repeatable, available to support a wide variety of use cases where automated decision making in some capacity could have an advantage is really important. And so having kind of that dual tactical and strategic function is how we've seen the AppFit Award come into the picture.
Yeah, if I may add to that, I think Chris covered the value of death aspect very, very clearly, right? From what we in commercial we call as a pilot program, trying to get the technology a proof of concept and working in a small environment, and then taking into production scale. In industrial, in commercial sense, it's very simple because there's budget available. You do this and you move into production, and you get that done within the year or whatever 18 months time frame, and you get to go. But the way Congress programs money for defense usage is these different colors of money. There are certain colors of money can be only used for test for R&D. There is some for O&M. So trying to reprogram that is going to be difficult. And if you prove something out and trying to get it into a program of record, into a budgeted cycle, that is going to be either 12, 24, or 36 months, depending on which cycle, which time period of the cycle that you hit. Companies like ours may not exist in the 24 months or 36 month cycle, or we might have pivoted away and gone somewhere else and not focus on defense. Whatever the work that has been done to prove something out, and the warfighter needing it and wanting to deploy it may not be available by the time we are ready. The money is ready, right? So that is basically what AppFit has helped solve for, and prevent that or build a bridge over the valley of death that we can accelerate and get to deployment, right? Like in our current case, right, Admiral Small, as you envision this program, imagine Hormuz Strait being the topic of the town. And if Iran decides to litter that sea basin with things that are undesirable for shipping, we can immediately go there and help with what we've done with Project Ammo, right? If not for AppFit, that capability would be sitting in shelf on one Mark 18 fish, and it'll take like maybe another 24 months before this can be deployed in a scenario. Over.
A great discussion. And I think that also highlights the reason for the focus on commercial software, right? And this idea of you don't have to develop, to your colors of money, you don't have to develop some new capability. It already exists. You just need to use it in maybe an innovative way for DoD. So the idea of procuring licenses rather than paying for a team to go off and develop something. So yeah, great points both. Um, so I gave a sort of a broad brush overview of the progression of the program, but can each of you sort of walk us through, from your perspective, the journey of the project from that initial prototype to that operational capability? And what did you see as key inflection points along that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll start with this one, right? So I think DIU ran an amazing process in the CSO and bringing us all together and vetting and validating the right technology to bring to bear. I would say the initial phases of for us as a commercial company, trying to understand the different IT requirements from DoD, right? Like getting into an IL2 environment, we didn't even know what an IL was, right? That impact level network. So starting with an IL2 environment and going to IL5, that progress was very helpful in envisioning for us to figure out, okay, these are the steps that needs to be done. So that's more from an infrastructure perspective. And then the second layer of okay, from an application usage perspective, okay, this is where the data sources are. These are the users of the technology, meeting the different Navy contractors and Navy civilians that are working on this program. So that was another understanding and then training them on the tooling that we are providing. And then the critical inflection point for me was when we built everything out and we went out for a test in AUKUS off the coast of Australia, doing the wet test and being able to update the model in real time. That was a key inflection point of all of this. Was we could sing Kumbaya all day long on bringing the technology together, but actually making it work and making it work in a real life scenario made all the difference. And I think that accelerated a lot of belief within the Navy as well as within the DoD. Over.
Yeah, absolutely. To add to that, so I think some of the things that the Navy and Project Overmatch and AMO did very well was cultivating a culture of collaboration across the different industry partners as well as the civilian government officials and other subcontractors that they had on board from the beginning. The Navy deliberately took a best in breed approach. So did they went out and tried to find like a vendor that could kind of do all of these things? Perhaps to some degree, or maybe try to layer in a variety of open source tools that would need to get stitched together and built and maintained over several years. But they deliberately decided to go with commercial solutions that can accomplish these tasks, best in class today. But what that then necessitates is strong collaboration across not just the tooling vendors, but also working in tandem with the folks that are going to be going in and building and maintaining these models over time. And so we've had a series of on-site, week-long collaborative efforts that help align folks, identify potential gaps, and gave us the ability to start to get ahead of those and make it to where we can help deliver on the outcomes that were required of us as stated in the initial agreement. And Jag said on the infrastructure piece, right? We had to deploy into impact level 5 and impact level 2 and then 5 and going beyond. which required a variety of technical controls and making sure that our security postures were intact. The other piece was that we could demonstrate, to Jags's point, that we could reduce the time that it took not only to deploy a model initially, but also to be able to, once that model is no longer performant, remediate that model and redeploy it in a very difficult environment, unmanned underwater vehicles, within an acceptable time frame, one that would be mission relevant. And so AUKUS being that first exercise where we came out and took the time it took to deploy a model from 6 months down to 2 weeks, the time that it took to retrain and redeploy a model from roughly a year down to 2 weeks, really caught the attention of senior leadership across the Navy. And I think it gave a lot of oxygen into the program to keep seeing this forward. Since then, we've had the opportunity to continue to iterate and refine our approach across exercises with NATO allies and now in APAC, and we've gotten this down to sub 1 week, and we're continuing to refine our processes. But I think those were critical instruments from getting buy-in for us to continue this work, but also expand scope, which is the kind of final inflection point that AtFit helped launch us into.
Yeah, outstanding. You both mentioned that the results of that AUKUS exercise, and I remember the first time I was heard about it, which was probably an hour or so after it was done, and it was pretty amazing. So all that work that I was not privy to, and then the result was pretty amazing. And yeah, there was a lot of leadership really perked up at that. That was pretty amazing. Okay, moving on. Chris, you had mentioned earlier about scaling, and so I want to kind of dive into that a little bit. So we've talked about the demo that we've well, we talked about the ammo demo and things like that, and the fact that these tools are available. But how do you envision this capability expanding across other branches, missions within the Navy, the DoD, or even other federal agencies? And then, if you could, what are any enablers or blockers to broader adoption?
Yeah, great question. So to take a step back, Domino's value proposition in the commercial market, where we've operated for roughly a decade, has always been working with large enterprises that have sprawling infrastructure, tooling, models, lack of oversight, lack of collaboration, lack of reproducibility. So, in general, an inefficient process that isn't being managed like other business units that poses risk for the organization because they don't have a handle on this. And so we've done exceptionally well in pharmaceutical companies and finance and all these areas where impact, the outcome of these models can have real serious consequences. And so where we've come into the picture is providing almost a system of record for AI and machine learning, where you get a central orchestration layer. You can orchestrate compute where it lives. You can access data where it resides. You can pull in the software tools and integrate out with software tools that are needed to develop, deploy, monitor, maintain these models over its life cycle, and doing it in a fully interoperable way where we can partner with great commercial partners or open source tools, et cetera. I say all that because our vision for government has been, wow, there's even more tooling and model sprawl. We could provide so much value and help the DoD extract so much more out of its investments that it's already made. We've worked in that capacity with a lot of civilian agencies, just due to the nature that they're managed. They have kind of a central IT that oversees an organization typically. In defense, that's been a much longer pole in the tent for obvious reasons, right? There's sensitive data, there's great security concerns, right? When we talk about disparate compute in a DoD context, that's a different conversation than an enterprise, right? And you talked about all the edge devices that live out there, right? So it's a big problem to wrangle, but there's so much opportunity in that problem. And that's kind of what we've been pushing on since day one. Obviously, our most immediate focus was reaching those stated objectives, like I discussed, right? Deploy into the infrastructure, help reduce the time on this particular use case. But still, we've always had an eye towards how do we make this scalable? And so I think we're on the precipice of hitting a serious inflection point when it comes to scalability. And I think there's a way oversimplification, but two general areas to be considerate of when thinking about scale. The first is, do you have a baseline compute environment that is scalable, that different programs can come and bring their use cases and access the resources that they need to power said use cases. That's not to say everything has to live on a on-prem, specific on-prem cluster. This could be multi-cloud, hybrid, right? But at least have the administrative capacity to onboard these different use cases in some type of compute environment, right? Where you can have these centralized tooling layers like Latent, like Domino live. So that's the first piece. Within that too, you have to be mindful of different classifications of data. So you're going to want a low side environment. You're going to want potentially several high side environments to actually be able to onboard different use cases that have different data classifications associated with them. The second area is around contracting, right? Which is apropos for an AppFit webinar. But how do you get them onto a centralized vehicle that has a high enough ceiling where they can collaborate with our existing KO, bring dollars, and work within that framework? And so what we've seen on our journey to kind of get here, right? A couple, I think, important aspects. One is we collectively, as the industry partners at AMA, earned a broadly written MLOps success memo that isn't too overly defined for the particular use case and is broad enough in nature that folks that have other machine learning AI use cases, whether they be automated target recognition, whether they be some other flavor of computer vision, or they might just be some kind of back-end business automation that they want to drive efficiencies in, they now have the ability to go directly to a production contract with us. All right, so that was important. The other piece was getting onto a production OTA vehicle that allows us to onboard those teams onto an actual contract vehicle, because for the first couple of years we were operating on a prototype, earned the success memo, got onto a production vehicle. So that's what needed to happen on the contracting standpoint. And then on the infrastructure standpoint, and fortunately, and I was always kind of looking for different organizations that had a little bit more of a horizontal mandate where they wanted to provide scalable capabilities, either within the Navy or DoD writ large. And there's been some organizations that have attempted to do that, to varying degrees of success. But Project Overmatch has really stepped up to provide enterprise capability out to the Navy. And I think the thing that's really important in the tack that they took is that they started with real world use cases that they've proven out and showed that these MLOps pipelines work well and that they can be made available to other developers, where some of the other organizations kind of took I would say the backwards approach to that, where let's get the infrastructure, let's buy all these things, but it might not be proven out. They might not actually have demand centers that want to come and use this. And I think I speak for myself and JAGS that given the success that we've been able to show, the conversations we're having across Navy, the demand is quite high, right? And so now that we're able to bridge that gap commercially, architecturally, I think we're in a really good position to scale.
Jags, any thoughts on the scaling?
So as an entrepreneur, right, like one thing that is a lesson that I learned earlier in my life is that if I have to learn from every mistake that I make, there is not enough lifetime for me to make those mistakes and learn, right? So I learn from other people's mistakes and learn from other people's successes as well, so that you short circuit your timeline and try to achieve more in whatever time that you have. I think that is a basic principle that everybody across Navy, Army, Air Force, across the DoD, they need to look at this, right? From a program perspective, AMMO has been absolutely phenomenally successful. What can I learn from this? What are the mistakes that the AMMO team did that I shouldn't repeat? And what are the good things that they did that I can replicate and even accelerate my success timeline? I think there's a fundamental brain shift that needs to happen within the department. And I have met so many well-meaning PMs and even from an operator perspective, no, we need to define this on our own terms and we want to own this and we want to have control. I get that. I get all of that, but how long are you going to spend in trying to get your own way defined rather than take something and mold it to your requirements, right? So that fundamental shift needs to happen. And until that happens, and then we talk about reciprocity in terms of network and security classifications. I think reciprocity needs to happen at the tooling level and the architecture level as well. So, over.
That's good. I got my wheels turning. I wanted to add one more point on the
Mhm.
back of that. Yeah, very well said. Yeah, I often come back to this thought of, great's the enemy of, good's the enemy of great, or whichever direction that one goes. Um, it is a fundamental shift in thinking, particularly for DoD, who are used to operating in the world of hardware, right? Where you better get it right before it goes into manufacturing, right? Where software kind of takes the opposite approach, where you want to deploy, iterate, refine, right? And thinking less so of like this ultimate outcome and more thinking about how do you progress along the way. And that's very much in line with, the software purchasing memos that the DoD has been created. So there's a ton of smart, innovative thinkers. There's a lot of organizations like Project Overmatch that are absolutely thinking about it in that direction. But given we have a broader audience here, that is a point that I would just double click on, that it is a different approach. We can deploy prototypes very quickly. We can work problems out in real time. And most often that's going to get us to a much better outcome as opposed to trying to over engineer this from the get-go without really having a realistic picture as to where you can get.
Yeah. I'll add one more point to this, right? Like, so coming back to our core capability, right? Latent AI toolkit is basically essential for you to compress an ML model and push it onto different edge devices, right? Be it a UUV or a UAV or a USV or whatever that may be. From a scaling perspective, what we have done is that we've taken different hardware targets from the NVIDIA ecosystem to the Intel ecosystem to the Qualcomms, all that we have in our lab, and we run the different models, tune them, and run them on these hardware physically. And then we're measuring about how fast they run, how much memory they take, how much power do they draw. All of this we've done, and we have profiled each one of these runs. So as a PM or as a user, I can come in and look at this and like, which recipe, which combination is best for my use case? You can pick that and quickly run with that. This is like, I'm drawing a parallel here, right? Like if I have to go and build let's say, a fishing line detection or an anchor line detection using the side scan sonar, I don't want you to go build your own pipeline and give money to an SI to go build it all custom and then deploy it. And once a program is done, somebody else has to come and redo the whole damn thing. Instead, like what Ammo has done is literally like an AWS service, a cloud service that is available. Anybody in the Navy can just come in, use the tooling that is already available. It is fully built stack. You just plug in whatever data you need, and then you can start using it. So that mindset needs to happen.
Yeah, and I think the vision for how this tool chain was brought about was, and with the program office, right? It was all about, we're not trying to replace your automatic target recognition software or the developers of that software on the edge. We're also not trying to take over your data ecosystem and all that, but what we're trying to do is abstract away and provide modern tooling that anybody can use. It just happened to be that one use case. But if you have a piece of software on any device, edge device included, and you have data that you need to turn into something machine learning operations, we tried to abstract all of that tooling so that anybody can use it. So you're correct in that. That was a couple of use cases, but it is a rich field for expansion and scaling, and a lot of that work for the infrastructure piece has already been done and is available for people to come in and use. And I think that was what AppFit sort of recognized there. So, anyways, okay. So obviously you all are partners in this endeavor, and I just wanted to talk to you about the role of industry partnerships. So How have Domino and Latent AI helped accelerate AI readiness for the Navy? And what makes a defense and industry partnership truly effective?
When I started in the defense ecosystem, right? Like I didn't know what acquisitions were, like none of this, right? Everything was like a foreign language to me, and I had to learn through the process. One thing that I learned earlier on in my endeavor is that relationships matter, and what relationships bring is that you get to understand the problem set much more intimately than trying to read a problem statement printed on some website, right? When you interact with people, you get to learn more and more about the problem statement, and you start to influence your roadmap with the problem statement that they're talking about. So that was an instrumental piece of knowledge that I unlocked earlier on is getting to know more people and getting to talk to the end users, getting to talk to the PMs, getting to talk to the entire value chain. So that was a key piece of learning for me that I brought. The other aspect that people that I interacted with, both at NIVIC PAC and Army and other places, right? They were willing to listen. They wanted to know what we knew. There was eagerness to understand how can we do this differently, right? Like, what is the best way? What have you done over there that we can borrow here and implement it on our end, right? So that relationship absolutely worked both ways, and it has been an instrumental thing in the way we have built our business around defense, around DoD for latent AI. And then the other thing, as you're familiar with our business, right? Like the different use cases that we have come up with, that even the customer was not thinking about, even the operational folks were not thinking about, trying to say like, hey, because of our technology, these are the things that you can actually apply and you can do. And that opens a lot of eyes, and they understand what they can do, and they have included as part of their con ops to build out. So those are the 3 points I would say.
Yeah, I would just add, I think the thing that impressed me most about how this project's gone on, and I think a big rationale for the success, and I hinted at this earlier, was the culture, I'll call it, of collaboration that was kind of set forth day one, right? And I think we all had an understanding. When I say we, I mean the software vendors that were brought to bear, that we each were best in class at specific things, and that the main objective, is that the end users, sailors, are getting the best outcome possible, right? The best, the fastest, most accurate decision making possible. So, with that guiding beacon in mind, we could proactively start thinking through how do we provide a better solution, right? And not thinking about this as several parts, but really thinking about this holistically with specific outcomes that we were trying to drive in mind. And so, based on that, and I think it's important to note, right? Like when we hear this, build it yourself or hire a systems integrator to kind of stitch together a variety of software versus buying off the shelf licensed software, the off-the-shelf licensed software works day one, and it usually, it's maybe an overgeneralization, but I think it's fair to say that most of the time in DoD settings, it'll get you, 90% of the way there, perhaps a little bit further, but there are nuances to a defense use case, especially in the field, that, we're just not building, models for acoustic sonar data, right? That's not a huge commercial need. So, making sure that, to Jags's point, we're getting close to the end users, to the sailors, to the civilian supporting them, understanding what their issues are, understanding what they're trying to accomplish, oftentimes getting ideas as to how we can better streamline their operations and where we can inject use case. I mean, that was one of the big takeaways from each of these in-person exercises. I'd usually leave there with 2, maybe 3 things that we could do better, or we could extend ourselves to provide a better outcome to. And that's those add up, right, over time. And then that's why we've seen it in the results, right? Going from 2 weeks down to a week, down to 6 days, and continuing to crunch timelines. And which opens up apertures for us to support a wide other variety of needs that are a little bit more time critical. So that's a big piece. And, I guess I'll just close by saying and double clicking on the fact that collaboration, while common, between customer and vendor, it's a little bit of a different situation where you're collaborating across other vendors. And so I think there's, several ways to approach it, right? Obviously, having these in-person activities is great, but we were all, I think, empowered in a, non-hierarchical sense to reach out to one another and figure out how we can stitch together better solutions for the end user. And it's been quite impressive in my view, no system integrator attached to the program, but we have a central solution that provides a unified experience that delivers really impactful outcomes. So I think that's probably an interesting and instructive model for future engagements that are looking to take a best in breed approach.
Just to kind of riff off what both of you said, that obviously this world of artificial intelligence is moving so quickly, and new companies come along, founded every day, and how have you set yourselves up to continue to approach partnerships, maybe with organizations that don't even exist today? I mean, what is it that you've done to make sure that you're open to new partnerships and things in this ecosystem?
That's a good question. So, as I mentioned earlier, right, we've been doing this for roughly a decade. Our product was built with this ecosystem in mind. I think fortunately our founders had the vision that no single vendor is going to outpace this market in the open source or the commercial sectors. And that was true then, it's even more true now. And so I think from a product design standpoint, it's important that vendors create their capabilities in an open and extensible way, open to hosting or integrating with the open source community, but also the commercial community, right? Because there's a lot of great vendor supported products that do very important things that are supported, right? That you're not just going to be able to pull in from the open source. So having rich API base to integrate out with other tools, right? So I think at a product level, that's kind of where it starts. And then there's also, a culture within organizations. Some, tend to be more forward leaning when it comes to collaboration and partnership. Others a little bit less so. Won't go too deep into it, but right, you can look at different business models and how, yeah, for us, for example, we have a license-based model, right? It's not a consumption-driven model, and that was intentional because we don't have a incentive to try to hold on to work inside of our system, right? We're more than happy to port your work wherever you'd like it, right? Whether that's in another commercial vendor, whether it's somewhere else. So I think it kind of goes all the way through the business, from the product, the commercial model, in addition to the culture that exists. But it is critical, and I'll just echo your point, that you're open to this, because again, one vendor trying to do all of these things well, in our experience, is a recipe for failure.
Yeah, I completely echo everything that Chris said, right? Like, and as we started this company 6 years ago, that is exactly the principles that we followed. And after getting exposed into the DoD side, I started to learn about MOSA, modular open systems architecture, right? Like unbeknown, we were actually building with that principle in mind, right? Everything that we have done is modularized. Everything has an API interface that you can plug and play wherever you want. We were not tied to a particular infrastructure. We could run anywhere, like containerized, so you could deploy it anywhere. And then, as we look at it from an AI ecosystem perspective, you have semiconductors, your platform, the fabric that you run on, that is critical. From an edge perspective, that is very, very important. So we have partnerships on that side, up and down the stack, from small players to the NVIDIAs and the Intels of the world. And then on the data side, data is also a critical piece to this equation. So we have partnerships on the satellite data providers to commercial data providers and synthetic data providers. They all are easy to integrate with our tooling so you can design and build stuff. And we ensured, like, one of my first hires on the go-to-market team was a head of partnerships. So that gentleman's main role is to ensure that we talk to every ecosystem partner in there and how do we bring them into the fold. And I still take calls with incoming founders that are interested in the defense ecosystem. So I work as a mentor and also trying to figure out a way of how do we integrate them into our ecosystem. And case in point, we were at Special Operations Week in May. In our booth, we had 3 partners combined together to do a demonstration. Right, one was a mesh network, and another one was a drone OEM, and then Latent AI providing that AI at the edge solution for this. Right, so that we strongly believe in that, and we continue to foster that ecosystem.
Very good. Thank you both for that. So I touched on it in the overview, but as you both know, the speed of warfare today, the changes that are happening, everything from gray zone competition in in South China Sea to see what's going on with Ukraine and drone warfare, doing things that people just until it happens wouldn't have thought it was possible. That's moving very, very quickly. So with that as the backdrop, what advice would each of you give to other branches or programs looking to move from experimentation into operational AI deployment?
My first suggestion would be set your bar very low. Fail fast and move forward, right? I think there's a saying in football, when you fall down, fall forward. So when you get up, you get the two-yard advantage. So for every program that is trying to do something, do not have this the JSITs requirements and trying to have this high bar of success that you set, and you set yourself a failure. Try to set the bar lower incrementally, as Chris mentioned earlier. This is a software-defined warfare that we're getting into. It is no longer dictated by hardware. Even your precision munition, everything is software defined. Have the ability to iterate and fail and move forward slowly, right? That'll be the key lesson that I would say, like, people need to learn and adopt. Chris.
Yeah, those are the thoughts that come to mind. The one other piece I'd add is think about future funding sources, right? We've touched on this valley of death notion a couple times, and we've seen, early in the process, or as early as logistically feasible, start thinking about future POMs and where you want to invest dollars for this kind of work, or talk to organizations like the R&E office who issues AFIT that can potentially provide a bridge. Because the worst thing, and Jags hit on this earlier, is you have this successful prototype, but no foresight has been given into how you're going to continue to fund this or take it into a production contract. And we've seen this happen, right? We've had successful prototypes where there just wasn't that bridge, and then everyone's kind of spinning their wheels at the last minute, and then this goes offline. It can be for a year, it could be for greater period of time, and it's a waste of money for the DoD, right? But more importantly, they're not getting the impact that they originally went through this process for. And so I do think, and obviously there's a lot of leaders that are trying to figure out how to avoid these pitfalls, but I don't think we have a perfect solution there. So just thinking about palming money early and thinking about different areas where you can try to find funding to keep these kind of prototypes or even small grade production capabilities alive until you can get into something like a sustainable contract vehicle, whether it become a program of record or otherwise.
So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being with us this afternoon. I want to thank all of our participants who joined us today. We hope this webinar has been helpful for you and your organization.